started.
So I welcome all of you to this Freewheeling Conversation about storytelling with Dr. Janardhan Ghosh. And my name is Debasish Halder, who, besides being a research scholar at School of Drama and Fine Arts, Thrissur, at the University of Calicut, also happen to be the student of Dr. Janardhan Ghosh for at least half a decade now, if not more than that, right? Yeah.
Right.
And I have had the privilege of observing Dr. Ghosh very closely, working under his guidance, his direction as an actor, as a director, and I have had the opportunity of exploring myself in multitude of capacities under his esteemed guidance. And this is a very special moment for me because storytelling is something. An arena of or a genre of performance that I believe today is the elementary or the rudimentary part of any performance. Any performance tries to convey a story, a narrative, a philosophy, maybe a silence, but the silence has its own shrieks, right? A silence is not just completely silent, right? The Foucaultian discourse pervades into it. So of course, so there is communication. So I will be conducting this interview more like a student who wants to explore more about storytelling and wants to understand this unfathomable depth of Dr. Janardhan Ghosh's wit.
No. Actually, Debasish is a partner to the crime that I'm involved in. So we have been having almost similar kind of a journey. And yeah, you can continue continue with the introduction and then shoot questions if you have any.
I will straight away move to this question. I will straight away start shooting questions. And the first question I want to ask is, why don't you call it just theater? Why do you call it storytelling?
Correct. That's very interesting. Like why these kind of nomenclatures that we use. Recently, I was having a dialogue with a person. She is also a performer. That how do we differentiate between drama and theater? When we use it in our Bangla language or in Sanskrit, we call it Nataka. But in English, we have two different words like drama and theater. And mostly, if you look at these common meanings, they offer is drama is more or less the literary, the textual part of it, and theater is the performative part of it. But I have seen drama to be also performative. Like we are dramatic in our way of dealing with people, in our expressions, we are very dramatic. So these terms are very confusing and we should not get attached to terms as such. Definitely, storytelling is also a performative form and theater is also a performative form. Theater is, I feel, is a bigger canvas because we have a lot of other people also involved. Like even if it is a theatrical performance of one single person doing a solo performance, but there are other people contributing to that performance, design-wise, costume-wise, music-wise, light-wise. But a storyteller is almost like a solo traveler.
Alone.
Yes, he is in his aloneness. That's the beauty of this performance. But storytelling is also performance. Theater is also performance. Theater has its own space. Theater has its own dimensions. Theater has its own features. Storytelling has its own world altogether. But they are also kind of, somewhere overlapping. You cannot say there is no story in a theater. At the same time, you can't say there is no theater in a story. So they are kind of sharing things from each other, contributing, enriching, and making it richer. That's what I feel.
But what do you think is the superstructure or the superset of which, which one is the superset and which one is the subset, if we talk about it? Because I'll tell you why I'm asking this question.
Yeah.
I believe that, so my questions will be directed in two directions. First of all, I believe that when it comes to performance, when it comes to telling stories, so music or singing is storytelling. Dancing is storytelling, but both the mediums use different semiotics, right? Theater itself is telling a story, right? Writing a letter is telling a story in a way, right? Reading a news editorial or writing a signboard, everything depicts something. There is communication, right? But when it comes to arts, when it comes to fine arts, especially like be it dance forms, be it theater, be it music, right? It's not just the communication, but also the modus operandi of the communication, right?
Correct.
So there is a necessity of communication. That's the reason a communication is being made. But there is a particular way, there is a particular embellishment or set of embellishments which are incorporated in order to get this communication done. And often the art form is associated with this mode of embellishment, right?
Correct.
Because the similar communication is being made through different art forms. A Baul
Correct.
song might delve into the concept of Advaita in a way, right?
No, it does. Like a bowl song or a performance or a dance, it can have a philosophical connotation.
Right.
But the question that you asked is about this Venn diagrammatic structure, that which is the superset and which is the subset,
Mhm.
or is it like a sharing of two sets?
Mhm.
What I feel is storytelling and theater, it is not in a form where there is a superset and you have a subset inside it. Rather, it is two groups of sets which overlap, which intersect. So there are elements of stories which is also present in theater, and there are elements of theater which is present in story.
Mhm.
Independently, there can be stories which might not be theatrical, and there might be elements of theater which might not have a story. With,
Mhm.
uh, different kinds of forms of theater. You are a research scholar in theater, so you have seen that. If I ask you a question, can there be a theatrical performance without stories? I think there might be. Uh, it would be difficult to say whether you have a story to it or not. That is not there. But without story, can we do a theater? If that is the question, then I feel that there might be more theatrical moments which doesn't have a story as such, story defined as story. But because the human mind is wired with the comprehensive skill, which is story oriented, like anything that you want to comprehend, it should be in a form of a story. So then it comes that, because I like to call ourselves not as Homo sapiens, but as Homo fictus, the fiction man, the story man. We are made out of stories. So, which I was telling just a couple of minutes ago, that we are made out of stories. So if we are made out of stories, anything that we do is having a story. And if you don't have a story, then you cannot cognize it. Cognition doesn't take place. You are unable to give meaning to it. You are unable to kind of define things. You are unable to build a relationship with that thing. So in a way, if you see that every theatrical performance is having a story. Now, if I term that each one of us are made out of stories, then everything is stories. So then story becomes a superset, and then you can put in theater, dance, music, art, even news, conversation, dialogues, everything is a story then. If you take the, in a generic term.
Yeah.
But if you look at story as a performance art, performing art form, story as a tool, story as a skill, then we have a different altogether we have a different sphere to discuss, a different world to kind of explore.
Right.
Yes.
So talking about talking about this both the sections. First of all, let's go deeper into this thing that um, story in everything. Story as the superstructure, right?
Correct.
I'll get back to that instance when you say that if there can be there can be a theatrical performance without this without a so-called story, right?
Now, without the notion of a story, like
Without the
the
notion of a
notion of
story.
story.
But
Yes.
eventually, with the semiotics of the body aligned in the space,
Correct.
with the usage
Everything.
of the silence, there will be a communication, and ultimately, what is catered in simple
Yes.
words that can be described as a story, nothing else but a
Story.
story,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, that is what I'm saying. That when you look into, as you said, the semiotics of the body, the
Mhm,
semiotics of your, the construction of your sentences or sounds,
mhm,
even if you don't say utter meaningful sentences, the sounds that you are making,
mhm,
when this reaches the audience and the audience is trying to comprehend it, the structure, the superstructure, as you said, which is allowing that audience to make a meaning out of whatever you are doing,
mhm,
is in a form of a story.
right.
It might not be linear. Like recently, Godard, I read a line from Godard.
Mhm,
He's saying that every story
mhm,
has a beginning, middle,
But
and an
it
end.
does not need to be in that
But
order.
it need not be in that order.
Yeah.
So that's thought that it is there, but it might not be in order. Like it is not a linear progress, progress. But it has that element of story, the beginning, the middle, the end. There is a narrative there. And that narrative is being kind of explored in a very different language
I
altogether.
still have this question that what distinguishes a story from a narrative? Are both the things same, or is there are there some nuanced differences?
As far as I see the use of story as a term and narrative as a term by scholars, especially academic scholars, definitely story has a very generic use, but narrative has a very scholarly meaning added to it. Like when we are using the term narrative, it has got a very particular structure. The narrative has a structure. But story, I think, is more free-flowing, more open, more experimental, I would say, more living. But a narrative always has a defined structure, a defined movement, a very, very, I would say, academic navigation that takes place when you are discussing a narrative. That is what I feel as per the usage of the term narrative and stories. But story, I feel, is more a complete thing, whereas narrative is it's a style, it's a form. Story is more of an object. Story is the thing, but narrative is a process, or it's a style, it's a methodology. It's more of a term that defines a particular thing, that is narrative. But story is the thing. So I can say a story is having a narrative style. A story
is having what?
A narrative style. But a story might not have a narrative style also. Anti-narrative stories can also be there.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was pointing at. And talking about this, also talking about just now what you said about a narrative and also a story which is more free-flowing, right? Keeping aside this stories without any narrative, coming to stories with a narrative, let's talking about Chaitanya. When he has his narrative of bhaktism, if that is the politically correct or spiritually correct way to put it. If it was spiritually correct, there would be no requirement to put it in the first place. But when Chaitanya has this narrative of bhaktism, and that narrative is being put through performance and stories and everything, right? So how does this exchange or interchange or interplay between both this two different notions, right? And also the narrative is not devoid of the sagun nature of that time and that space, right? It starts from that time and that space, and just like if I can take the liberty and to use Grotowski's theater as a vehicle, right? It takes us from this ordinary towards an extraordinary, right? Using performance as a vehicle.
Right.
Right. So how does narrative and this free flowingness of story play out? Is the narrative also free flowing in this context?
As I told you, that narrative is more like a structure. It's the kind of a guideline which a particular thing is following. So there is, suppose we can say, as you said, the narrative of bhaktism. You said that the bhakti movement, it has its own narrative. That means it has its own pathway. But a story is something independent of this style or form, which has its own kind of identity, because it has its own life. It has its own life, and it is not a guideline. It is not a structure which makes you understand a particular thing, or it is not a lens.
But Chaitanya's stories are contributing to his narrative, right?
Now, what I feel that the stories can provide a narrative to bhaktism of Chaitanya. Like this, different stories are adding to the narrative of bhakti movement that Chaitanya propagated, that Chaitanya himself preached, lived, experienced. So what is it? The entire narrative is the journey from the beginning to the end. And stories are different elements which is enriching that narrative. which is substantiating that narrative, which is giving proofs to different claims made by the narrator. Here, if Chaitanya is the narrator who is creating this narrative of bhakti movement, stories are actually giving him the tools to prove his claims, to prove the prowess of bhakti, to prove the entity of bhakti, of devotion. That is, stories is actually kind of substantiating it. So it is like a material which is filling up the structure. If narrative is like a skeleton, story is like muscles and veins and blood that is being added to that structure and giving it life. That is what I feel. Now for Chaitanya, he had used, as you said, like Grotowski, used theater as a vehicle to not only transport but also transform. The entire journey of Chaitanya had been so performative. His entire bhakti movement has, I think, is based upon performance of kirtans, of dances, of even direct theatrical performances of events from Bhagavat. All these things are there. So I think Chaitanya has used performance amply to experience the spiritual world that he desires to. And performance gave him that experience, performance provided him that experience, and he promoted performance also in a very interesting way because he integrated performance in his bhakti movement itself. He made it an essential part. Kirtan is such an essential part of bhakti. So Kirtan came into that. So as because I know you being a theatrical person, your inkling towards theater is more. So we can also kind of move a little bit more into storytelling as performance, stories, how stories define us, beginning of stories and all. We can also talk about that. And definitely theater comes in, goes out.
No. Actually, it's not theater exactly. See, theater came very late into my life, but theater. But before theater, it was so there has been performance in my life before theater also, right? Consciously, unconsciously, yes.
Right.
So I'm always trying to reach the roots of this the germ of it, where it is germinating from. I'm trying to reach that place, that elemental place.
Yeah, the rudimentary, the elementary state.
And from that elementary state, I have this question that, okay, there can be a long debate about or long discourse and discussion about what actually starts the stories, right? But I want to digress towards how the stories are being told, the embellishment part that I was just saying, right?
Correct.
So when you are just using the word storytelling, this entire thing becomes very open-ended, right? It's not just limited to theater. It's not just limited to the known agents of performance. It could be anything, right?
Right.
It can travel from one domain.
I'll just kind of intervene. As I was looking into the history of storytelling, if you see storytelling, and if you see from ancient time, like 30,000 BC, they are talking that in caves in France, there are these paintings on the cave walls. And maybe that can be considered to be the beginning of storytelling. And then from there, slowly and gradually, we have storytelling evolving. And the Gilgamesh, fairy tales, epics, all these kind of gradually move towards modern theater. Then from theater, you come to cinema to the digital world, the television, performance stories coming in front of you. And then now this is the world of AI stories. And technologically, they are so like the virtual stories, the virtual world of stories. So if you look at storytelling, you are very right in saying that you cannot kind of segregate it separately. It's the entire journey of human evolution, the evolution of civilization from that cave painting to present day virtual, this world, the virtual world. It's entire story of storytelling. It's a story of storytelling. But that is why I don't call my performances as storytelling. I rather call them as story performance. I call them katha abhinaya. Katha is story and abhinaya is performance of that katha. Because storytelling kind of moves into, it's like rhizomatic. It moves into anything and everything.
Exactly.
isn't it? This conversation between us, it's just also kind of building up as a story. Yeah, this is what. Please continue from there. I just thought I'll just.
So exactly based on this Katha Abhinaya thing, I know how it changed from Katha Kali to Katha
Yes,
Abhinaya. So Katha
correct,
Kali,
correct,
that is the expansion of a bud, right, into
correct.
a flower.
The
The
blooming of the bud. That,
blooming of the bud into a flower.
right,
Right.
right,
It has that quality of this entire word has this quality of this rhizomaticness, being rhizomatic.
right,
But
right.
we are moving towards a more definitive space, which is Katha Abhinaya,
Correct,
right?
correct.
How does this
Right.
happen? How did this happen? And do we find a different definition some years later, maybe?
You might not know. To be very honest, Debashish, what I like you, I am still so much into theater. And maybe if you see my early performance, it is so very theatrical. Like I had groups of people working with me. I did performances on stage. I used all the technologies that theater had been using. I've digressed. I've experimented. I have moved. I've departed. I've done a lot of things with theater, and I'm still kind of in love with it. But then this detour that I took somewhere in the middle, around 6, 7 years ago, was this individual journey. Now, what was happening is when I was doing theater, I had this group of people coming and working with me. And you know how difficult it is because times have changed, people have less of leisure time, everybody is racing against time. And so, getting people who would actually spend time with you to do theater with the same kind of mindset, with the same kind of frequency, it was very difficult to find. And that also in a third world country where the logistics are so very, fragile, poor, I would rather say pathetic, that you can't provide even the fare to the person who is coming to help you out with your performance. You can't do that. Then it is very difficult to expect that commitment, that kind of syncing of minds, that kind of coming to one singular thought, one singular idea. That was getting very difficult. And otherwise, also, I thought that even if they are coming, even if everything is okay, even if the situation is so very perfect that there is no other issues and everybody can come and do theater together, then also I found that this individual existence of all these 5 or 10 people working together can never, ever be the same because of our own unique way of thinking, our backgrounds, our philosophy, our identities, our experiences. It's so different. So if I am going to kind of work on a unit thought, a thought which is something that is mine, I think storytelling or a solo performance is the best tool. I thought of that. It was economics, it was logistics, and also philosophical, because I was also looking for an inner journey where a group won't be helpful. A group is never helpful for an inner journey. A group is helpful in different other ways, but not if you are trying to kind of delve deep into it. That is where I thought storytelling, story performance, this played a very important role. And then I coined this term called Katha Koli, because I felt that it was a blooming of an inner desire which I had. I wanted that to kind of really explore and bloom. And so I thought that Katha is like a seed which has to be, nourished in such a way that it blooms into a flower. And that is my performance. That is my story performance. But later I found out that just blooming of that flower is not the complete act that act that I'm actually desirous of. I am also looking at, through my individual performance, I connect with the cosmos. And cosmos is a bigger desire, but I connect with the audience, I connect with the walls around me, I connect with the background, I connect with everything. But the origin is myself that is there at the center, and then it expands in such a way that it connects with the entire existence around me. And that can only be done through Abhinaya, because Abhinaya allows you to expand yourself, to kind of break the boundaries that the
Be
skin.
ubiquitous.
Yes, ubiquitous presence. That is why I changed the term from Kathakali to Katha Abhinaya. But I'm still doing Kathakali with culture monks, and I'm doing Kathakali workshops there. But Katha Abhinaya is another expanded thought that I'm exploring.
Semiotically, how are both these different?
Semiotically, if you look at it, then Kathakali is more based on, I would say, stories which are collected and they are being performed as an individual performer based on various Natya Shastra elements and structures of Natya Shastra that is found in this treatise by Bharata. From there, I have picked up elements and I have tried to, what you said, embellish. I've tried to give power to my performance through these elements, give a proper methodology, give a process, how that story can be performed. So that is, I'm including the superstructure of Natya Shastra, using it for my storytelling performances. But whereas in Katha Abhinaya, I am also, so it is not very different because I'm also taking things from Natya Shastra. I'm taking the rasa theory. I'm exploring rasa here through storytelling also. I'm looking at the four abhinayas also, Angika, Vachika, Aharya, and Satvika. I'm doing all these things. But apart from that, what I am doing is I am moving into a process of embodying the story. It is like I am not performing or telling a story. Rather, I'm the story myself. I'm actually trying to be the story in Katha. Like in Abhinaya, a performer is trying to be a particular character, an actor is trying to be a particular character. Here, I am trying to be the story myself. So when I am doing a story performance, it is not that narrative style, it is not my gestures, it's not my costume, it's not my singing. My entire entity is actually that story, or rather the vehicle of that story. It is carrying the story inside, in my muscles, in my bones, in my breathing, in my looks, everything. That is what I am aiming at. Now, because this is a very ambitious aim, being
Yeah,
the story.
it's basically that this age-old rift between being and becoming. Simply
Absolutely.
put.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
that's why I'm curious that how was this achieved? Like being a story, that's becoming a story itself, not performing it, but becoming a story. How is that?
Becoming a story. Yes, becoming a story. Now, if you say how was it achieved, I would say I have still not achieved it. I'm still kind of. You remember that once you did mention about your this calculus thing, and you said about tending towards zero and never becoming a
Yeah,
zero. You
asymptote.
keep on kind of you keep on reducing the distance,
Yeah,
but you can never be the zero at all.
yeah.
So the journey. My goal is to become that, but the journey is actually taking me closer to that goal. So every time I do that performance, and that had been, this is something that I have not just found now, or this is not the desire that I'm nourishing now, but it was there earlier also when I was doing theater, when I was doing Kathakali also. But now it has become a predominant, because I'm seeing this here in Santhal Paragana. Here in Santhal Paragana, when I am interacting with these tribal story performers, they are actually kind of living the story. They're even the narration is a part of their life. It's
Yeah.
nothing. So they have stories like stories about medicinal herbs, stories about marriage, stories about everything that they do in their life. It is like that, and most of these tribal stories are actually their living, their livelihood. So there, I don't find this difference between life and performance, and that attracts me a lot. I desire that if I could also be like them. So that has been a great inspiration for me. That has been the only positive thing of me shifting from Kolkata to Madhupur. That has been. Otherwise, I'm missing your plays. I'm missing your performance. I'm missing my group. I'm missing Calcutta. I'm missing so many things. But this is something that is actually making me survive here. I'm seeing these people. Every movement is actually a story, as you said, that everything has that seed of story. Now, they almost live it when they are even performing a story. Suppose I ask them, tell me a story, tell me your origin story, like the origin story. How did this world come into being? Tell me that story. So the Santalis, they have their own origin stories. Every tribe, they have their own origin stories. So when they are telling these origin stories, it's not like us moving from our life into the performing space as if, okay, now I was talking to Debasish, now I disconnect myself, and now it's like I keep on talking to Debashish, and I also do my performance. My story is actually, the connection is not removed from Debashish. It continues. So this is what I actually want to develop. That is, I'm still searching, and I don't know whether I'll be able to kind of configure it ever to find out, as you said,
Maybe
semiotics. Because
I hope that this search never ends. And to that, I would say that I hope that you never reach there, so that you still you
yeah,
you
the search continues.
you never get the darshan, so that you are in this quest, in this thirst of reaching there, and this thirst, may this thirst uh, uh, generate jewels for us. May this thirst uh, create riches for us to explore more and get a taste of that world. So
Thank you.
we had a
Thank
great
you.
session today, and I feel enriched myself.
Okay, so we'll meet again with
Yeah,
further discussion on this. Thank
yes.
you so much.
Thank
Take
you, sir.
care.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.